Hello and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our webinar, IdentityMind 2.0. We're very excited how you helped us shape, how our clients helped us shape transaction monitoring. And our speaker for today is our Director of Product, Faisal Nissar, and he'll be walking you through all the new additions that we have in version 2.0. So without further ado, I believe that Bright Talk has already covered how to ask questions, how to leave feedback. So as you think of any questions as we go through, please just leave them and I'll be going through them. We plan for this presentation to last for about 30 minutes. Leaving about 15 minutes at the end for questions, hopefully. And if we don't get around to any, we'll definitely follow up by email, so don't worry. So without further ado, over to Faisal.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar on IdentityMind 2.0. In the next 30 to 45 minutes, I will share details about our 2.0 platform and how digital identities can be used to onboard good customers, protect your platform from fraud, and illicit activities like money laundering or terrorist financing. So at IdentityMind, we build digital identities, which is a digital construct of a user, and the digital identity can be used for identity verification, payments, and transaction risk assessment, as well as automating your compliance. Our platform is SaaS-based, supports REST APIs with real-time response back to our clients, and we are global with 230 plus million identities worldwide. So our platform, so you can use our platform for onboarding, for meeting your AML compliance requirements, as well as for fraud prevention. So IdentityLink is the portion of our platform which builds the digital identity using our eDNA technology. And during onboarding, all the attributes of a user are correlated as well as evaluated for risk, and verifications are performed. So once a digital identity is formed, that is the foundation of how it can be further used for your anti-money laundering and for fraud prevention. You can use our platform for your AML regulatory compliance, which includes your KYC, including CDD and EDD, sanction screening, as well as transaction monitoring. And as we go through the slide decks, I'll share additional details as to how elaborative our AML solution is. And then in addition to that, you can also use our platform for fraud prevention. So fraud prevention is more on the payments and transaction side, and allows both from a transaction fraud, but also on the identity fraud, like synthetic identities, stolen identities, or account takeovers. So our platform is a one solution from your anti-money laundering, fraud prevention using digital identities. I'm very excited to share details of our IdentityMind 2.0, which is our risk-based AML transaction monitoring solution. So the base of our solution set is trusted digital identity. So what trusted digital identity is that from an onboarding perspective, given that a user coming on board is one of the key steps in protecting your platform downstream, is it allows you to answer 4 questions accurately and effectively. One is that, is this a real user? Second is does the identity information provided by the user does actually belong to them? Third is that, can you do business with this user from a regulatory perspective? And 4 is that, do you want to do business with this user from a business risk perspective? So in the very first one, you get a quick answer that, okay, is that a synthetic identity fraud? Is that a real user? Is that a stolen identity? So it gives you more perspective from that. And then also protects your solution or your platform from bots or other mechanism as to how a user can be onboarded. Then information which is presented by the user that is verified using our digital identities as well as our third parties. And we also support, from a regulatory perspective, screening each user to make sure that you can do business with a user from a regulatory perspective. And from if you want to onboard this user or you want to reject this user based on the risk thresholds which you're using for your business. Going into a little bit more detail from an onboarding perspective, from an onboarding, our solution is very elaborative. It takes care of an end-to-end solution, starting off with building a digital identity, KYC, and continuous monitoring. So in our platform, it is not just a one-time KYC where a user is getting onboarded to your platform, but it is more of a continuous monitoring where the risk of a user on day one might not be the same at 90-day interval or at 180 days. So the risk of the user is evaluated. And additional KYC, especially on the EDD side, can be done as the risk of the user is changing. Then we also have the capability to basically, we have designed what we call as a KYC plugin, which is a pre-built onboarding form. UI, UX has been optimized for onboarding. So that is another option. Either you can integrate to us via APIs, or you can use that plugin and you can be up and ready in a matter of minutes. So from a digital identity perspective, digital identities are created using our eDNA technology. And what that does is that as a user is providing their information, each of the information set provided by the user and information which is collected, additional information regarding your device and other IP-related information, that all is brought together into a context of a user. And based on the context of a user, a digital identity is created. In addition to our digital identity network, we also use our partner ecosystem. So we have 30 plus partners within our ecosystem, which can involve from an ID verification perspective, device IP, email reputation, doc validation, biometrics, social network, is just to name a few of them. And all of this information gathered from our partner ecosystem does also go into the digital identities, giving it a more richer, more context-based view of a user from a digital identity perspective. And as digital identity is formed within our platform, a digital identity asset is formed within our platform, you also have a reputation. So reputation is also calculated in real time, and it's based on, so you have a more real-time view of a reputation, more from a risk perspective, which this user brings to your institution, to your business, or to your platform. Business relevant information, so we also do KYB in addition to that, and that also is played within digital identities. So after digital identity is formed, so as part of your KYC and monitoring, your continuous monitoring, you can do identity verification. So this is what I covered in the previous slide. We also have an ability to do staged KYC, especially for our potential clients or existing clients where they want to perform a different level of KYC based on how the user is interacting with their platform or how far along the user is from using their platform, so they can do a more staged KYC approach where you let the user on board based on one level of KYC, and as a user starts to do more transactions, then you can do additional verification. And in situations where there is a fraud or suspicious activity, then you can trigger an EDD from within the same platform. We also use risk profiles. So risk profiles allows you to, this is the same concept of using a risk-based approach. is where you can apply EDD or CDD or KYC based on a risk which a user brings to your institution. So not everybody goes to the same set of extensive KYC, but depending upon the risk, it goes to the appropriate level of risk profiles. Continuous monitoring. So once a digital identity asset is created within our platform, it is continuously evaluated based on the level of KYC which they went through, the transaction monitoring from a fraud perspective, transaction monitoring from a sanction screening perspective, as well as additional details, a reputation using our eDNA as well. So we do global ID verification, and our coverage is pretty extensive. So our platform is global, and we do global ID verification as well. Going to the more from a user experience perspective, so that's where our KYC plugin comes into play, is where it has been optimized for onboarding, where it's extremely easy to embed within your platform. So if you do not want to create that experience for a user, for your users, then you can go ahead and get started using this plugin. It embeds within your onboarding sequence on your site, and then a user basically provides information within the form, and then that form is pre-integrated with our IDM risk and compliance platform, so you do not have to worry about API integration either. It allows, it's a more of a drag and drop with highly customizable from a configuration perspective as well as some setting perspective, so everything is managed through a UI, and you do not have to worry about a lot of technical details or technical configurations behind how you can customize and provide a great experience for your customers. It also has pre-built in image capture capabilities. So if you're doing document verification, so it has the appropriate SDKs for mobile web and for other mediums to basically collect the right set of information. So this was a quick overview of our onboarding. Our onboarding solution is very extensive, but it gives you the depth of how depth it is from an onboarding perspective. Then looking at sanction screening. So the sanction screening is also one of the main components from an anti-money laundering perspective. So sanctions, there are two main components of sanctions. One is the list which are supported, and the second is the engine, the comparison engine, which basically says that, okay, if this user is a potential match or no. From a sanction list, we have a very extensive coverage. We have about 350 to 400 lists globally, which also includes your sanctions. It also includes your PEP, and it also includes other lists, a regional list as well. So you do not have to worry about any updates. Our system automatically takes care of all the necessary updates. Some of the lists are automatically updated. Other are updated at a frequent interval based on when the updates happen at the regulatory body or whoever is publishing that list. In addition to that, our system also allows you to configure appropriate sanction list based on the user characteristics. So if a user is coming from a certain region or they're transacting with another user within a certain region, then you can go and specify, okay, I want this user based on this characteristic set go through only these sanction lists. The second component is the scanning engine. Scanning engine is where you compare the name, address, all the information which is collected by the user against the sanction list. And we have a very advanced capabilities from a comparison perspective. In addition to fuzzy matching, we also have tuning capabilities. We use data matching algorithms which are fine-tuned over a period of time using machine learning. And given that there's a lot of unstructured data, so machine learning plays a very effective role in reducing false positives when comparing this information. And again, the concept of continuous monitoring, where a user is not just evaluated one time, but it is a constant, continuous monitoring on a user. And you can also do a batch scan in real time depending upon your needs. Then the third main component is transaction monitoring. So now that a user has been onboarded, they're screened against sanctions. Now we have to look for suspicious activity which a user can perform, which can be potentially, it can be an illicit activity tied to a money laundering or terrorist financing. So how we approach transaction monitoring for suspicious activity is that your detection, your investigation, and then your reporting. So within the detection phase, we use risk-based approach. So we start off with the very first one is once you have your digital identity. So digital identity is the most useful input to a risk-based approach. So what we also internally call is a top-down approach. So you start off with a user, you look at the user attributes like the products which they're using, services which they're using, their origin. So all the aspects which can assist in determining the risk of a user. And after that, they go through the appropriate risk profile and risk rules. And in the end, you end up with a user which has performed a suspicious activity. In addition to that, not only the detection is just not by a top-down approach, but we're also working on a suppression engine using RPA. So this is the robotic process automation, which looks at the previous alerts which were reviewed by an analyst and taking those inputs and determining if this future suspicious activity needs to be reviewed or no, hence significantly impacting your false positives. In addition to that, we're also working on bottoms-up approach. So it is a more machine learning oriented. So instead of starting with a user and looking at the attributes of a user, you start from the bottom where you look at the user, you look at the transactions, and then based on the transactions, you segment them together based on the risk was introduced, and then go all the way back up. Then the next main component is investigation. So investigation is more UI UX optimized functionality where you have user-centric alerts. So within our platform, instead of looking at transactions like many other solutions in the industry are doing it, we have a more user-centric approach. What that does is that it allows you to have one single view of a user in the context of KYC, in the context of sanction screening, or in the context of suspicious activity. We also support alerts and case management, and they are highly customizable, highly configurable, so you can basically tailor the solution for your own business needs. We also support regulatory compliance SLAs, so this is the concept where the system keeps track for you based on the regulatory body where you have to report how much time you have left to report to make sure that your team stays on task and reports or concludes if an alert is closed within a specific time. We also have our focus from an investigation perspective is very heavily on the visual analysis. So that's what we call the analytics dashboard, which allows you to look at the transactions, your deposits, your withdrawals, your transfer sending, transfer receiving between users in a more visual graphical context, so you can quickly identify if there's an abnormal activity for this user. Then we also have link analysis, and we also show money movement. So you can basically look at the money movement behavior of a user and determine if any structuring is being taking place in there. Then, I've already mentioned workflow and configurability where it can be tailored to your own business needs. Then reporting, from a reporting perspective, you have the capabilities to generate a suspicious activity report, a SAR report for FinCEN. In addition to that, we also provide reporting on an AML program as well as from an operational perspective, how your team is performing. And during 2.0, we went through an extensive UI redesign as well, which allows, you have a more modern UX design which is more optimized for the functionality of an investigator or an analyst, depending upon what information they're looking at, and assisting them in concluding. Instead of looking at a bunch of data, a bunch of screens, you have all the information in one place where you can quickly conclude if the case or alert needs to be dismissed, or additional due diligence or additional investigation is needed. It is self-service, so the design is easy enough where you don't have to go through manual and a lot of video training, but it's very self-focused. Going to the next one, so sharing a little bit more details from a risk-based approach. So this is the foundation of our transaction monitoring, is that, and this is how we differentiate ourselves with others in the industry or others who are not using digital identities-based transaction monitoring, is as part of risk-based approach. For us, it's dynamic, contextual, and transparent. So let me explain, a little bit more detail for each one of them. So from a dynamic, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a static state. A user is getting onboarded. It's a continuous monitoring on a user. And we also use what we call internally as a tag framework. So tag framework allows us to add additional context, which an institution might have within their own platform. So when a user is seen within our platform, you have all the context of a user either from different platforms, different solutions, or within your own institution. So you're looking at a more cohesive view of a user. Then it's the contextual. So contextual is that it's the user not by himself, but also in relationship to the entities which a user is providing or using, and how this user is connected to other users within our platform, and what risk do they bring based on the connectivity and the link analysis. We also support for our crypto exchanges and crypto clients cryptocurrency risk assessment, so that can be used as a risk indicator for a digital identity as well. Then we have anomaly detection. So this is not an anomaly detection which you just look at the user historical behavior, but this is more on the lines of peer group analysis, a customer group comparison, where you're comparing a user based on its attributes to similar users within your platform to determine any outliers or determine if there is a suspicious activity being performed. Then we have kept our risk-based approach very transparent. So instead of just having a one risk score, let's say as an example, 75 or 85, you pick a number, but ours is that you get a more in-depth view as to, okay, why this user is going through this level of risk assessment based on which attributes of the user are riskier. So you have a more clear, more context, more accurate view of a user, so you can know, okay, this is why the user is going through this risk-based segmentation. And then the UI is very investigative focused as well. This is a quick overview of from a detection perspective. So this is what I was referring to earlier, is that the user starts off with, we look at the user attributes for a risk-based approach. Then you go to the AML profiles, AML policies, and within the policies, a user's transactional transfers can be looked at from an excessive transfer perspective, historical deviation, geolocation, digital currency risk assessment, and in the end of the funnel, you have a user with alert with suspicious activity. So that's what's being evaluated instead of looking at a bunch of transactions. Then this is a quick snapshot of our UI. So this is the UI which has been optimized to review the alerts from an analyst perspective. So you have all the relevant details of a user, all the relevant details of a suspicious activity, and they can perform the investigation. This is the dashboard which we use to investigate the alerts. So you start off by looking at the transactions, looking at the suspicious activity and the transactions which belong to that suspicious activity, and then doing peer group comparison, have a more graphical view of your transactions and your historical deviation using IQR. These are the snapshots of our case management. So case management can be very customized to your own needs. It also allows you to communicate with your customers. So if additional information is needed, then you can go ahead and within the case management solution, you can communicate with the user and all the relevant information stays in one place and can be accessed related to a user. Then this is the snapshot of our reporting. So reporting allows you to have not only in your AML program level details, but also operational reporting as well. So basically, the idea was to give you a quick snapshot of, how from a UI perspective, how the interface looks and how it has been optimized for UX. So during the last, 20-25 minutes, if you summarize, I mean, the key themes and the foundation blocks, which I have at a very high level discussed or touched, has been the risk-based approach, your onboarding experience, the importance of having effective alerts and how they help you in reducing false positives, importance of continuous monitoring where it's not a static, but more of a continuous monitoring, SLAs, sanction screening, the level of KYCs, so you can do both CDD and EDD depending upon your business requirements, compliance optimized UI, so UI is very compliance oriented. In addition to that, you have your reporting and your virtual currency risk. So what I want to do is I want to, for each one of them, I want to quickly highlight as to like why they're important and why it's very important for any solution in the market to have these. And if you do not have these, then why it makes sense to come and use our platform. So starting off with the risk-based approach, so you look at FinCEN, you look at FATF, OCC, FINRA, so a lot of regulatory bodies, pretty much you go and look at their directives, you look at their instruction manuals, you look at any additional studies which they have provided, pretty much all, I mean, most of them, if not all, do ask for or do recommend using risk-based approach. So in this example, the URLs are present. So this is the BSA manual. In addition to that, you have the FINRA at the bottom. So both of these examples is where, I've highlighted that, okay, how they're recommending using risk-based approach to detect suspicious activity. Then continuous monitoring, again, another example, this is taken from FinTrack. So I've tried to gather multiple examples just to keep it very elaborative, is where, the recommendation of continuous monitoring where the responsibility is not just to do, just monitor at the time of onboarding, but, a continuous monitoring of the user. Effective alerts. So from an effective alerts perspective, if you look at any research which has been performed on AML compliance pain points or AML transaction monitoring pain points or AML challenges which clients or potential clients are having, if you look at Forrester or ID Group or our internal IdentityMind global surveys, it's very apparent that about 75 to 80% of the businesses or institutions are still struggling with false positives, and it is impacting both from an operational perspective, but also not allowing them to focus on the alerts which matter the most or which introduce the most risk to their platform or to the institution. And hence the focus of our platform heavily has been on reducing the false positives and generating effective alerts on which the investigator or the analyst should be paying their attention on. Then from an onboarding experience, so we do support both API where we allow you to do a staged based KYC, as well as form, which has been optimized where you can go ahead and integrate within your platform and get started right away. From AML program reporting perspective, so this is another example from an FFIC where they're providing instructions as to okay, how you're supposed to keep your board or your committee aware of your AML program. So we have a report specifically dedicated for that function, which gives you a more funnel view. Starts off with the users, which transactions the user performed, how many of those were suspicious, if they were suspicious, when they were investigated, and then funneling down to give you a more elaborate view of your AML program. Then this is an example of an AML alerts DUI. So this is a fine for a casino, 8 million. And if you go and look at the details of the consent, so it says that, okay, one of the reasons they were fined for is that, okay, they were reporting their suspicious activity beyond 90 days. So this is where due date comes in. How we have structured our platform is that at every single time, the moment a user is crossing that default date by when either the alert should have been closed or reported, to avoid these type of fines from regulatory bodies. Then compliance optimized UI. So this is another fine for this commercial bank, 29 million, where, if you go a little bit more details, where they were supposed to capture, the investigations which they were doing, they were supposed to capture additional details, additional documentation, and what was the resolution and why it was escalated. And this was one of the reasons. So our UI is optimized where every time you are trying to close an alert or you're trying to escalate it, or all the additional details regarding the investigation is captured within that. So not only that the analyst or investigator becomes very easy, but downstream, if an examiner comes in and audits your platform, it meets all those requirements. Virtual currency risk assessment, so another fine, 110 million for facilitating ransomware or darknet drug sales. So this is where you can use our solution to identify for each of the transaction hashes or for each of the addresses and determine the risk to protect your platform from these fines. Then sanction screening. So sanction screening, this is, our solution has been very focused on how effective the alerts are and what operational savings you do. And we have proven with a lot of other clients as to how effective our solution is. And it supports 350 to 400 global lists, and it has the advanced matching algorithm as well. And then from an overall landscape, so this is the Forrester AML study vendor landscape. So you can look at IdentityMind, and then you have other solutions like FICO, NICE, and other solutions. So what I want to highlight over there is that if you look at other solutions, they're more financial institution, big financial institution oriented, where our solution is more optimized for fintechs, MSBs, marketplaces, and virtual currency exchanges. So, in addition to the differentiators which are highlighted in the report, our solution is more optimized for fintechs primarily. So that was the high-level overview, what we have introduced in our IdentityMind 2.0 platform from a digital identity perspective, and how those digital identities are used for onboarding, for fraud prevention, to protect your platform from anti-money laundering or illicit activities. And not only that is, giving you a platform which you're working on effective results, low false positives, and from an operational perspective, it's very optimized. So I'll open the floor for Q&A.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that presentation, Faisal. I'm sure that, yeah, we've all learned quite a lot. It's not too late to ask questions, so, we're still taking your questions. Please keep sending them through. And just to give him a bit of a break and a chance to have a drink maybe, just wanted to let you know, I know we kind of went through some of those slides quite quickly, so the session is being recorded. If you just come back to the same link a little while, maybe half an hour or an hour after we finish today, you should be able to see the recording play in the browser. So hopefully if there's anything that you wanted to go over again, that should be quite easy. And yeah, let's get to a couple of questions. So we have about 10 minutes. And again, just to reassure, if we don't get to your question live today, we'll definitely be following up. And you'll probably receive an email from me shortly after as well. So we had kind of a nice one that just kind of summarized a lot of what you were saying, which is asking, how is a user's risk measure applied dynamically?
Yeah, so how the risk is applied dynamically is two aspects to it. One is the continuous monitoring, and the other one is the tag framework internally, which we refer as tag framework, is where you can associate additional context to a user. And what our platform does is that it looks at all the attributes of a user and dynamically assesses the risk which a user brings to your institution or to your platform. So instead of doing risk scoring, or instead of recalculating the risk, as the attributes of a user change over a period of time, the risk of the user dynamically changes within our platform.
Great, thank you. And then this is another really great question that I think hopefully a lot of people would be interested to hear about, which is, how does your technology detect synthetic identities?
Correct. So definitely a great question. So from a synthetic identity perspective, so that is considered as an identity fraud. So a quick overview of synthetic identities, that's a situation where a user which is onboarding your platform, they're using entities or attributes which belong to other user, like somebody else's email or somebody else's address in some situations, or other attributes. So what our system does is that once a digital identity is formed and they go through a verification method within our digital identity network, when a new user is coming on board, that user, each of their entities is evaluated for risk. And if a digital identity has previously been formed within our platform, then it becomes very easy for us to detect, okay, this is the data attribute which is being used by this user but actually belongs to another user. And then we can prevent and protect your platform from identity fraud, which can be a synthetic identity.
Mm-hmm. I think I don't want to get cut off, so there was just a really quick question that I think it came sort of quite early on in your presentation about they were excited to see the new UI. So obviously we had a few sort of glimpses, but if you want to see any more, then definitely please get in touch with us. Again, I'll be sending a follow-up email, so we can definitely walk you through a demo and show you around 2.0 as well. And then just another one that's come in, so thank you. This would probably be our last one, is about the wording is, how do we rate customer risk level?
How do we rate customer risk level? So what we use, there's two ways how you can look at from a risk level. One is that from a digital identity perspective, internally what we call is a graph risk score, and the other is a digital identity reputation. So these reputation as well as the graph score is a very good indicator of a risk which a user brings to your platform. And this gives you a more quick insight as to that, because itself, the reputation risk is basically it's continuous, it's real time. So each activity which a user is performing, that is being evaluated, and that plays a role in determining if it is a good user or what is the level of risk which they bring. In addition to that, since we use the tag framework, is where you can pass additional information regarding a user, and that information is also used to assess the risk of the user. So you have both the scoring as well as the reputation of the user.
Great, thanks. We have actual seconds left, so I just want to say thanks to Faisal for today's presentation and for coming on. Thanks to everybody for joining us. We will follow up with everything. Thanks for all your questions, and hope to hear from you soon.